So welcome again on this last day of November 2022. We have been taking a brief look, really, at the Four Noble Truths following our year with the Lojong. And we've had a look at the noble truth of suffering in its various aspects, or the satisfactory nature of that which we experience on a daily basis, and those things that are composite and uh, impermanent and so forth, and the cause of suffering, the second noble truth, which has to do with the ego, that we are grasping or wanting to be things other than they are. We're seeing things differently than they actually are. We are seeing things really in a fairly, you could use the word diluted way. We think things that are impermanent or solid. We think things that are solid are also self-existent rather than being simply the process of coming together of various causes and conditions. And the fact that there is a cause is good because, as I think I mentioned at some point or another, if that wasn't so, we'd just be stuck with life is suffering. Um, and this says, well, there's a reason for that. And not only is there a reason, which was what we spoke of, there can be an end to suffering um, when we see clearly. We can be freed of uh, the need to have things be our way and really be quite at ease with things simply as they are. And simply things as they are might be that right now we're experiencing pain of some kind. We've had a loss or our body is hurting. But there can still be a mind at ease even within that. A mind, well, leave it there. And so, how do you do that? How do you, if there is an end to suffering, how can one cultivate that, move toward that? And that is where the fourth noble truth is there is a path. Um, and this path is very specific. It has eight folds or eight aspects to it. But a word about the path. I almost forgot I wanted to mention this. I'll be right back. I gotta find a book on my shelf. So there are two ways. There are a lot of ways of looking at paths, but there's one that is those who have gone before can say, in this situation, you can put your hand here to climb up this rock. You can put your foot here. You can do this and this and this. And if you follow these instructions, you'll benefit and will be able to move further along the path. Using the experiences and the fact that a lot of people have followed this particular path and have really come to um, a place of acceptance and ease with their lives, and it's very often coupled with a very effectiveness within those lives, such as Thich Nhat Hanh, Dalai Lama, other leaders, Mahatma Gandhi, for example. On the other hand, the path um, is formed as we go and can't be defined by someone else's experience. So all these things are pointing, and I just want to read this poem. It's by Antonio Machado. You may be familiar with it. Um, Wanderer, the road is your footsteps, nothing else. Wanderer, there is no path. You lay down a path in walking. In walking, you lay down a path, and when turning around, you see the road you'll never step on again. Wanderer, path there is none, only tracks on the ocean foam. A good balance, I think, to the idea that there's, you know, some concretized method to be followed. Ultimately, is the path we each walk ourselves. That is path. Nonetheless, the fourth noble truth is the Eightfold Path, and it's a description of how to go about it all. Even as we acknowledge that, you know, our steps are looking back, just tracks in the ocean foam. So I was looking at Thich Nhat Hanh again. That actually that was quoted by Joan Halifax in her foreword to a book called "For a Future to Be Possible" by Thich Nhat Hanh, which is his description of the five mindfulness trainings. And I thought I'd also kind of set the stage a bit from the heart of the Buddha's teachings again, Thich Nhat Hanh. His little sort of preface to the different sections of the Noble Path, the Noble Eightfold Path. He says, when the Buddha was 80 years old and about to pass away, a young man named Subhata came to see him. Ananda, the Buddha's attendant, thought it would be too exhausting for his master to see anyone, but the Buddha overheard Subhata's request and said, Ananda, please invite him in. Even as he was dying, the Buddha was willing to give an interview. Subhata asked, World-honored one, are the other religious teachers in Magadha and Kashala fully enlightened? The Buddha knew that he had only a short time to live, and that answering such a question would be a waste of precious moments. When you have the opportunity to ask a teacher about the Dharma, ask a question that can change your life. The Buddha replied, Subhata, it is not important whether they are fully enlightened. The question is whether you want to liberate yourself. If you do, practice the Noble Eightfold Path. Wherever the Noble Eightfold Path is practiced, joy, peace, and insight are there. And he gives a reference to the sutta that I said in. The Buddha offered the Eightfold Path in his first Dharma talk, you may recall. He continued to teach the Eightfold Path for 45 years, and in his last Dharma talk, spoken to Subhata, he offered the Noble Eightfold Path. Right view, right thinking, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right diligence, right mindfulness, and right concentration. Then he has a note here saying, see another section in the book here regarding the use of the word right, and I'll just turn to that real quick. And it says, in Pali, the Pali word for right is sama, and the Sanskrit word is samyak. It is an adverb meaning in the right way, straight, or upright, not bent or crooked. Right mindfulness, for example, means that there are ways of being mindful that are right, straight, and beneficial. Wrong mindfulness means that there are ways to practice that are wrong, crooked, and unbeneficial. Entering the Eightfold Path, we learn ways to practice that are of benefit, the right way to practice. Right and wrong are neither moral judgments nor arbitrary standards imposed from outside. Through our own awareness, we discover what is beneficial, right, and what is unbeneficial, wrong. I suspect that everyone here has heard that before in some form or another. It comes up pretty often with those words of right, and it comes up not just in the Eightfold Path. And it really gets down to a very practical question. It's right if it is beneficial to awakening, if it's beneficial to being beneficial to compassion, the development of compassion. It is wrong only if it takes us away from those things. It isn't about a thou shalt or a thou shalt not kind of a situation. So we just mentioned there, oh, he continues, by the way, and this is the end of that little section. Arya Ashtangika Marga, a noble path of 8 limbs, suggests the interbeing nature of these 8 elements of the path. Each limb contains all the other 7. Please use your intelligence to apply the elements of the Noble Eightfold Path in your daily life. And he even put a little diagram in here, uh, just pointing out visually that each of the factors on the path interact with the others. Again, just re-accentuating over and over again that there is no thing. Every thing is a result of processes that interact with one another. And that's true of this as well. This is full of concepts. And or full of points of view, which means that you haven't got the whole thing. He talks about that a little bit too. So traditionally, the first these are divided into kind of 3 sections. There's the wisdom section, which is right view and right thinking. There is the sort of ethical section, or section involved. Well, just say ethical, which includes right speech, right action, right livelihood. The things from which the precepts are taken, for example, come from this part of the Eightfold Path. And then there are the mindfulness is one, but it's sometimes sort of the mindfulness section, which is right diligence, right mindfulness, and right concentration. So they're typically grouped in these 3 sections. And it's interesting that also traditionally you start off with right view. And it reminds me a bit of starting off in the Lojong with the cultivation of ultimate bodhicitta rather than something a little simpler to get a hold of. And I think in both instances, the point that's being made is not that you need to have accomplished something and know that before you move forward, but simply to let the knowledge that you're sort of cultivating of you inform how you use the other aspects of the path. Um, these are not practiced in sequence. You don't get one and go on to the next. They all affect the others, and they're all practiced simultaneously. Each one really helps the other, informs the others. Um, so again, keeping away from trying to make boxes for these things, even though they're presented in that way. So, what is right view? Um, I had contemplated simply reading Ty's chapter on right view, but it's several pages long. We wouldn't get through it. One of the points he makes is right view. You can't say what right view is. It's always going to be your particular view of right view that you're talking about. That right view is something that each of us cultivates and deepens in our understanding. Um, some of the things that he mentioned about this, he says the Buddha said that right view is to have faith and confidence that there are people who have been able to transform their suffering. So, in that sense, right view is kind of trust in the practice. Um, we check it out, we work with it, we experience various things, and ultimately there comes a time when we can say, yeah, I trust this practice, that's a part of right view. Shariputra described right view, says Tai, as the ability to distinguish wholesome roots from unwholesome roots. When thoughts arise and tendencies towards various actions, to be able to really tell if this is something that is wholesome, which is very similar to right. It is something, is this going to be beneficial? Is this going to be helpful to moving into a place of diminished suffering for myself, for others? Is this going to help me see more clearly things as they are? Or is it going to put yet another obscuration between me and the world? So the ability to distinguish wholesome from unwholesome. Um, Another one he mentions the seed of Buddhahood, the capacity to wake up and understand things as they are, is also present in each of us. That this is a part of right view. In fact, this is said sometimes as this is what the Buddha said as he finished his meditation the morning of his awakening. Wonder of wonders. Each of us, every sentient being has the capacity to wake up and understand things as they are. It's present everywhere in everyone. Amazing. Um, and let's see, what else does he have to say? He talks again about the seeds. If you act in a wholesome way, you'll be happy. If you act in an unwholesome way, you will water the seeds of craving, anger, and violence in yourself. Right view is to recognize which seeds are wholesome and to encourage these seeds to be watered. This is called selective touching. Um, some of the decisions we have about what rants do we want to engage in our own minds. We've talked about that before. Sometimes they're very unhealthy for us to do that, or to listen to somebody else's rant for that matter. Um, he talks at length about perceptions, that they interfere with right view in part because they are so often erroneous. He says the Buddha also taught on many occasions that most of our perceptions are erroneous and that most of our suffering comes from wrong perceptions. We have to ask ourselves again and again, am I sure? Am I sure? Until we see clearly, our wrong perceptions will prevent us from having right view. Um, he points out the source of our perception, our way of seeing, lies very much in our store consciousness, that we see things. There's the old saying, it isn't that we believe what we see, but rather that we see what we believe. Our past experience colors things to the point that it can make things up before our very eyes. Um, our motivations and expectations are all colored by what has gone before. And we've talked a lot about the storehouse consciousness and how large it is compared to the small amount of consciousness that we have in our own immediate awareness. Um, so when that particular fear arises or that particular anger arises, uh, we think it's being caused by this out here, but actually what's happening is it's arising from our own storehouse consciousness into our awareness. Um, so he goes. I've barely touched the surface of what he says in this chapter. If you're interested, again, the heart of the Buddha's teaching. Um, Sometimes people say, "Oh, well, the right view is really increasingly realizing the truths of the Four Noble Truths. That when that is clear and is a reality for you, that yes, there is inherent dissatisfaction in the lives that we live, the lives of perceiving ourselves as separate beings, that there is an inherent dissatisfaction even in that, despite whatever other wonderful thing might be happening. When we have looked deeply enough to see that, oh, there, when I'm in pain and when these afflictions arise in my mind about the way things are out there, especially with those other people that drive me crazy and so forth and so on. These very painful emotions can arise, and there's a cause, and the cause has to do with the ego clinging, with the desires, with the grasping, with the aversions, with the not caring. These drive our suffering, and that it doesn't have to be that way. As we begin increasingly to hold that as real, that is, or could be looked upon as an element of right view. Another aspect of right view that sometimes is talked about are the four thoughts that turn the mind. You may remember those from the first point of the Lojong trainings. The preliminary practices include the four thoughts that turn the mind to the Dharma, and they are interesting. Here we go again, right? The first one is the preciousness of the human life that we have, with the subheading "Don't waste it." um, but it's an acknowledgement of beauty as well, and a place for gratitude right at the beginning, which is lovely. And then we come into impermanence and everything that is made of other things, which is everything that we interact with on this in this world, uh, changes all the time. Not just that it's one day going to go away, but it's different now than it was earlier, like 5 minutes ago. True for us, true for the mountains, true for fill in the blank. Everything is changing all the time. Um, Shinru Suzuki Hiroshi was once asked, half jokingly, give us the essence of Buddhism in one sentence. And while people sort of chuckled, he thought a moment and then said, everything changes. That was his little pith on that. That when we really see that and don't expect it to be otherwise, then the pain we experience with impermanence simply being there fades. And impermanence is thought of the understanding, the realization of impermanence is thought of as a part of right view. Um, Likewise, that next of the four mind turnings, um, cause and effect, karma, that when we see something out in the world or in ourselves, that we recognize that it is not a thing that stands on its own, but rather is the immediate current result of a myriad of causes and conditions. Um, it kind of takes the personal out of the equation. When you look at yourself and you're aware of the aspects that arise in you that perhaps you don't care for and would like to see be different, the capacity to see these as the result of the causes and conditions over which you really had no control makes it allows you to be non-defensive about it. It's not something that you have to protect in any way. And when you look out in the world and there's someone out there that's just doing things that you think are atrocious and maybe causing a lot of pain in the world, the the tendency we have seeing things as solid and permanent and of themselves is to develop a lot of anger, even hatred toward this thing. When we can apply causes and conditions to it, then oh, I see. This person is the way they are because of these factors and this situation and this culture and these acquaintances, friendships, this family, and so on. Um, and then it becomes more a question of curiosity and even compassion for someone for whom you may have really been experiencing a great deal of antipathy. Um, and that really happens as and I think we've all experienced that. So that is also considered a part of right view, that this is all, there are no, no nouns, only slow verbs. Everything is a process. Everything dances with everything else it contacts. It's changed by it. It becomes different because of it. So it isn't like there is this thing which has these factors. The thing, remove the thing. It's just those factors coming together in that way. As they change, the appearance of the thing also changes. So, that idea, the idea of causes and conditions in that way, is thought of as part of right view by a lot of people. And the last one I'll mention is the idea of self, which we've talked a fair amount about. Um, to see the self that arises in so many ways and is so demanding and pops up in certain ways and becomes defensive and so on, to begin to see that increasingly as a construct. Then it's made of pieces, that's impermanent, that comes together in the way that it does because of causes and conditions of various kinds. And to recognize that that is not who we are, but that is simply again, a construct. Um, one of the invitations of the Lojong is to, as we move in those first instructions, we're seeing the dreamlike nature, we're investigating the unborn mind, we are letting go of the conceptual in any sense, even as it relates to the unborn mind, and we're simply resting in that boundless openness and awareness. Um, I took a detour and lost my train there. Uh, oh my. At any rate, the self. Um, I remember what I was saying now. When we begin increasingly to identify with that, not resting in that, but as we identify increasingly with that which has no boundaries or particular qualities, and less with the ego self with all its faces that we so often identify with, again, suffering diminishes, our defensiveness diminishes, our capacity to look with curiosity and humor at the things that arise in us instead of saying, oh, it's who I am. And you get the idea there. that understanding around the idea of non-self is also considered a part of right view by many. So there's a few examples of what right view might be talked about by various people. There are others, and I think that ties thoughts that you can't really say what it is. Whatever you say is your view of it, and it's simply something to cultivate as we go along without getting tied into trying to tie it up and nail it down is the way to go with that particular fold of the Eightfold Path. So I'm going to stop, and I think there might be two more sessions, and I'm not sure where we'll get. But it's okay. So I will bow out for now and turn off the recording.